I found out quite recently after Ambient Mesh came on GA, I started testing it out on all these different environments. Turns out back then when I first tested it, I told you that it has compatibility issues with GK data plane v2 and autopilot and this and that. And it did have a lot of compatibility issues with certain CNIs. It's different now. And I tested it out on data plane v2, it works. I tried it on autopilot, it works. Tried it on EKS, it works. Tried it on minikube, it works. And now I was wondering what's happening, what's different. Because if I remember correctly, like the Istio CNI had compatibility issues with a lot of these other primary CNIs the clusters use. Turns out that they changed the fundamental networking architecture of how it works. So before, how it used to work was that the Zeta component and the Istio CNI would use the host network namespace to redirect traffic between pods. This is a Linux namespace I'm talking about. So that's the same namespace that the primary CNI uses. So in terms of, it could be a Cilium CNI, it could be your Amazon VPC CNI. Because that's your primary CNI, right? It could lead to a lot of networking conflicts, right? Especially when you start introducing network policies. So they might be enforced by one CNI, but not the other CNI. It causes a lot of conflicts. That's why it just wouldn't. And then they even switched to an eBPF model, which is again what we talked about last year. They switched to an eBPF model thinking, okay, this is going to be better performance. And it was better performance. But I think recently Istio and Solo, they realized, I think what they want to focus more on is compatibility. They want to make sure that this particular service is available to as many users as possible. And so they had to trade off a bit between performance and compatibility. And what they've done is now they've gone to in-pod network redirection. And essentially that's exactly what's happening right now in the sidecar model. What happened was they did some research. They found out that a Linux process can create and own a socket in another network namespace. And that's exactly what the ztunnel is doing now. So it has its own socket that's listening on these different pods, their own network names. And that's what's actually facilitating these communications. So now I think the security concern that people used to have previously about, oh, this network traffic is going through the host network namespace, this and that. Now it's just like how it is during the sidecar in the sidecar model, right? The only difference is that the container is not within the very same pod. That's the only difference.